Hi, welcome to the Also Called podcast, where we're asking hard questions about our place in this hectic world.
Join us as we dig into the truth about who God is, possibly discovering that we are also called. Welcome to the Also Called podcast. In the next few episodes, we're going to meet the women of our recently released book, The Other Disciples. Today, we're diving into the inspiring story of Susanna. She's the fifth disciple in the book. Join us as we uncover who she was, her remarkable generosity, and her steadfast stewardship in supporting Jesus' ministry. We'll explore the lessons from her life, ministry, and deep love for Jesus, and consider what they offer us today. So get ready for the journey into the heart of a faithful follower, and let's get started.
Oh, we know what Jesus did for her on one level. We know there was a physical healing or spiritual healing. There was healing of some sort. But reading through your chapter, there was a couple of things that I pulled out that I would love for you to just share a little bit more about. Following Jesus is more important than our comfort. And also, I love that you pointed out that Jesus ministered not just, we don't see this just with Susanna. We see it throughout scripture that Jesus ministered and included the marginalized and the broken. There was a healing we have an experience with Jesus, but other than just the thing that he supplies for us, sometimes there's so much more to it that it could be a heart change for her.
I think that healing was more than just physical, whether we know, it was physical or spiritual or not. Like it was kind of a restoration and an invitation back to the seat at the table. This is what healing would have done for Susanna and for the women that were healed, that were surrounded her in verses 2 and 3. And so it would be a seat back, like a restoration of whatever it was that was oppressing her. And so that's what I love about the picture of what we see in Susanna, and then the women that surrounded her, and then what she got to do from that. Like it was meaningful enough for her to say, I am gonna drop everything. Because she wasn't like cheering him on from the sidelines or giving when he came through town. She reoriented her whole life around this one who saw her and who made her whole. And again, like I can only imagine that perhaps whatever she was healed from was so different from being able to give out of her generosity from before. Whatever it was that was holding her maybe captive to not being able to be seen or to be generous. And that could be why she just so amazingly poured out of everything that she had in this way.
Love that goes back to what you're doing in your business with Invited Back. It's inviting people to come back and be what they were called to be, or discover it, or heal, or whatever. So I love that's kind of tied in. So my question is, you say on page 85, in a culture where sickness and spiritual oppression often led to isolation, shame, economic vulnerability, Jesus's healing of her was not just an act of mercy, it was a revolutionary reversal of her reality. So like you said, what changed for her? Can you kind of go into later on in that same page about Jesus speaking more about money and possessions than almost anything else? And what did that invite her into?
We see Jesus and we hear about him talking about the money and possessions. And it's also very connected to our hearts and the posture from which we use our money and possessions. Like we talk about in the book that like roughly half of his recorded teachings address this. And again, not because he was concerned about the money, I think, but he was concerned about the condition of our heart. And again, it goes back to that we have been taught certain things and we believe certain things about who we are and what we can do, sometimes based on what we have. And I think that is what the radical shift was for Susanna and for us as we think about what we've been given to steward. It's actually not our identity. It's a gift and a tool that we've been given to impact the kingdom with. And so if it becomes something that wasn't ours in the first place, then we see this opportunity as so much bigger than ourselves. And I love to imagine that about Susanna and the way that she gave of her resources. All of a sudden, it wasn't about this is mine and this is how I'm going to survive. It was, this is a gift and I get to use it to expand something and a story and a ministry and a culture changing, life changing message. That's what I'd like to imagine that she was giving into. And I think we learn about the way that Jesus talked about money, and it kind of puts us into either, Andrea, you mentioned like a poverty mindset, or we hear like the prosperity gospel. I guess we've heard that, right? And I think either way, whether you're thinking about money so much because you have it, you could also be thinking about money so much because you don't. And if you're always thinking about it, it's consuming your mind and heart. And I think that's what Jesus was trying to tell us, like in renewing our mind and the reality of it being a daily necessity to recenter, like, why am I doing what I'm doing today?
Well, that's perfect. Going into like the heart of stewardship you talk about in the chapter is what Jesus calls the light of our eyes. Can you explain that real quick and the whole idea of generosity?
Yeah, so that I love that what we are focusing on, like what our gaze is turned to, is what is being let into our heart. And it's, again, I think it gets lost in translation a lot, the connection between what we see and hear and think and feel, and like how we live and breathe and move out of that, and how we follow Jesus through it. And so I think the idea of, if we're focused on the monetary gain or loss of whatever is in front of us, that is how we are perceiving this opportunity. It doesn't become about the person anymore. You lose the thing that is in front of you to give and steward and love, but we see it as an opportunity for gain or loss. And I think that it's hard for us to make a shift because we're so conditioned to think about the monetary value of whatever it is that's in front of us.
As far as just the stewardship and getting into not just holding on to things so tightly and looking at that monetary loss, but I was incredibly blessed to have parents who didn't financially have a lot, but they were so incredibly generous. And so holidays, we always had extra people there. I can remember, which, this was early 80s. And so there were often groups of people singing and, going to churches and what have you. And we always had an open door and we would welcome people into our home to stay and things like that. So that's just an encouragement for others if you do struggle like I do with holding on to what you have because you want to leave your children with something besides trauma. That's something that you can do. You can just be generous with what you do have, inviting people in and sharing time and space and seeing those marginalized people like Jesus did.
Stewardship is aligning our heart with what God has in store for the future and really surrendering everything that we have to the mission that He's given us. And it's different for each person, right? It's not a mission that God has given like your neighbor, so you're just going to jump in on it. And I think that's what's beautiful about Susanna, like, and this stewardship is like, what has God given me in my hands right now? And if I open them up, what is there already? And that takes intentionality to see. You got to be aware of that first before you can give. And you have to be healed from the brokenness before you can give it, before you can give any healing and joy and of what you've been given.
I love that. And I love just what you had said earlier, that it's a gift that we've already been given. What are we going to do with it? And I love that you defined it. It's not just the money, it's the time, the energy, the love, the attention. It's whatever we have that we can offer to somebody else. And I love that. It's a beautiful definition.
One quick other thing, since we were talking about the stewardship, I love the way you put it in your chapter or in the Bible study coming soon. That stewardship is care for, organize, and grow what God has given us. And I just think that's really impactful because back to what Mia was saying, it isn't just necessarily the finances. It's so much more time, our energy, even our experiences. I think that's a wonderful way. And I guess I'm kind of getting into one of our other chapters where we're talking about witnessing, but I think that that goes with it too. What your experiences are is what God is preparing you for and being able to share that with others. So, Sabbath, what did you learn about God in her issue?
He is a God who restores and sees. And so when we think about Susanna being healed and not knowing exactly what she was healed from, we we know that he is a God who invites us to the table to use what we've been given so that we can share with others about him through that. I just continue to see him as this invitational, like an invitational father who sees what we don't, but doesn't push us to become that. He just waits until we're, oh, I need some help here. Like, I might need some healing because we can't be healed without first acknowledging our need for it. And so it's some moment, whether it was years of waiting and hoping, and then Susanna gets an opportunity for healing from Jesus, or it's in that moment that he finally sees her and then she's healed. Again, not a lot of detail, but the knowledge that she was healed and it changed her. And that's the God, that is what I'm continuing to learn about God too. It's reciprocal. Like, we receive this healing and we have an opportunity to do something with it. And then it goes back and forth and back and forth. And it's relational. And that's what I continue to love to think about between Susanna and God and our relationship with him as well.
I love that what you just said, because I'm sitting here thinking about the times that I didn't even know that I needed healing in something and he intervened with his grace and his mercy. And then there are times when I definitely knew something was wrong. I had tried in my own strength and my own understanding to get help, and therapy, it's an and with God, it's not an or in therapy. And it wasn't until I had an Emmaus counselor who helped me invite Jesus into some of my issues. And it wasn't until then that suddenly everything just seemed to click into place. And it's like, oh, now I'm seeing it from your perspective, and he could just totally heal it. So I love what you're talking about, is just that God is so gracious that it's going to be different every time that he needs
Yeah.
to be invited in, whether it's we recognize it or just out of his grace, he's going to go, let's address that with you now. So I
It
love that.
changes, like, we're continually changing and learning and growing. So our need for healing is also continually changing and learning and growing. And you get healed in one area and then you realize, oh my gosh, there's another one.
It's like Donkey says on Shrek, I'm an onion. Just keep peeling all the stinky stuff off. So that's awesome. That's really good. So let's talk a little bit. So now that she has been healed and she has this visceral reaction to her healing, steward of her money and being generous with her money, we technically can say that she is a disciple. So I like what you said on page 83. It's Susanna has a kind of discipleship that was deeply engaged and sacrificial. Her name is recorded because that her faith had an impact. So let's look at it from Susanna and from Sabbath's perspective. What does it mean to be a disciple then? And what does it mean to be a disciple now?
It's faithfulness. I keep thinking of this word faithfulness, right? it's not about like numbers, even though we're talking about numbers. Like, it's not about being famous, it's about faithfulness. And we see that in Susanna, because even though it was her name and this one phrase about the character of, really, right, because she's like giving from what she had, but it was engaged again, like she was with Jesus and the disciples and traveled with them. So she dropped everything that she had. And it's not that all of us need to drop everything we have and go, but it's a reorienting, I think, like a reorienting of our hearts and minds from like outcomes to obedience. And it's a quiet, I was just with an amazing group of women over the weekend, and we talked about quiet obedience multiplies kingdom influence. And I see that in Susanna. Quiet obedience multiplies kingdom influence. And I think that's the hardest part about being a disciple, the things that feel so unseen. And that, even that work, like with the counselor, does anybody else know how hard this is to renew my mind, to not judge myself and others based on the numbers I see, and to not tell myself all the stories? Like, that's what the numbers were to me at first. Like, when I would be working with a financial coach, I'd be afraid of those numbers because of the stories I made up about who, what they meant about who I was. And so, like, as a disciple of Jesus, we get to hear his voice in our head about who he says we are, not what the numbers tell us we are. But that is hard work. And that is like a daily engagement, what he's doing versus what the world is telling us we should be doing. And I think that's how I like to picture Susanna. Like, she was just in it, like whatever was happening, just get me at the feet of Jesus. And I have some things, you need some blankets here, like, it's cold, I got you.
That's beautiful. I love that.
And we actually had a missionary visiting the church yesterday. It's their home church, so they were coming back to visit and update us on all the numbers and stuff. And it's wonderful to hear those numbers about, salvation and people coming to Christ, but it is hard. Well, first of all, I can't imagine. Sabeth, I have so much respect for you and your family and missionaries. I can't imagine being in any position like that at all. So I have so much respect for it, but I can imagine it would be so hard because you want to see those numbers. I think this is a much smaller version, but I send a prayer or post a video or something where I'm sharing, being vulnerable about something that God has done in my life. And I find myself going back, like, who liked it? What kind of emoji did
Totally.
they respond to it? Because it's just like, it's not a pride thing. It's not about me, but it's like, hey, I'm pointing you to God. Like, you should be paying attention to this. So I can only imagine. I struggle with that on a very, very small scale. But I can imagine, like, as a missionary, the numbers, you would tie success, what people would call a
Right.
success, with the numbers.
Yeah. And I'm very driven by check boxes and a good outcome. So it's a struggle, and relationally even too, right? Like, in my marriage, I want the winning outcome. I don't just want a good one. And God's like, yeah, but what does that have to do with your obedient heart? I'm like, but I want to win. And so it's a daily like reorienting my heart and mind back to what really matters. And it's hard. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of noise telling us what should matter, whether that's what we see in front of us on the screen or whether that's what we've experienced in our past. We don't even know we're measuring ourselves up against, but it's there. And I think we can think that, I mean, that Susanna was doing the same thing. Like, they're rooted in their culture and in their family and in the generational work of their hands. And so she's coming now and she's saying the work of my hands is everything to this man named Jesus and his disciples and the movement that I see in them. And they're like, what? That's not what we've been doing for generations. So
I think another part of it is also in stewardship is trusting God. So I just, thinking about what you just said, she had to have a huge trust to walk away or to give away or, whatever it is that she did because we don't really know. I mean, a trust like when God has asked me before to give a pretty substantial amount of money to somebody, and I'm like, I don't know why. And I remember I had a situation like that. Somebody, I just got their name in my head and an amount, and I was like, oh, it's a lot. It's a lot. And I did it and didn't know that this family had a lot of kids and didn't have money for Christmas. Beautiful that God was like, I just need you to be obedient, Mia. You've got the money. Stop. And just knowing that it blessed this family and praying that it wasn't just the stuff at Christmas, but it showed the family God's faithfulness that they could trust when He called them to leave everything and go to school, they did it, and that He was going to provide every way. So it's just, I think that's another facet of stewardship is just the trust issue because, like you said, sometimes it's just obedience. I don't know why He's asking me to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. Or, just something dorky like giving somebody water when you don't know that it mattered that much to them, but it did. So I think that's the beautiful part of obedience and stewardship.
So, Sabbath, is there anything that you wanted to dive a little bit deeper into in your chapter that we haven't gotten to yet?
This idea of success and this idea of measuring, and I know we've been talking about numbers a lot, but when we look at entrepreneurship now and we find ourselves having to value our own calling, I think it's very hard for us who have grown up in the church to put a price on our time. And I just had this thought as I was driving the other day, like our capital is in our calendar. And I was thinking, oh, like we talk about you need capital for a startup. And then I was thinking about how scheduled our lives become, whether it's we're scheduling our own or our kids or our families or our coworkers. And that is the capital that we give from our calendar, our time, our energy, our effort. As we talk about stewardship and as we talk about like holding in our hands the things that God has given us, it would be good for us to remember that we have to protect our calendars as well so that we can be well enough to steward the healing we've been given. How many times I have said, okay, God, thanks for the healing. Let me run it all out in a week because I am needed and I need to be at this meeting and that meeting. And then I find myself like mad at everybody in my world. Like, wait a minute, my heart is not really where it should be. But then we can cover it up with the next meeting. And it's really tempting to do that. And so there's a lot to navigate to think about generosity and stewardship. And there's a lot of emotion involved and a lot of, again, going back to like, we've been conditioned to like value ourselves based on what we see and what we measure. And Andrea, even I was thinking you were saying, even we use words like, a little prayer, but that prayer is echoing in heaven. I was with that group of women this weekend and we were talking about like heaven keeps way better records than any CRM, any social media, any Excel ever could. We don't think about those records really, right? And so it's a daily, right? And the necessity was what I love about this series also called is getting surrounded. We can't do it alone. So we have to get surrounded. We saw Susanna and Joanna and Mary stay and get surrounded. And can you imagine the conversations they were having around those campfires? Or like walking and being like, did you hear John? Like, what is he talking about? I don't know, right? Like just these real raw conversations. And we need to make sure we're making space for that. What a gift.
I love that. And it's so absolutely true for introverts like me who want to just, let me just do my thing. And it's like, no, but I think I've grown the most around other people when I've been challenged or questioned or even just supported and believed in when I didn't believe in myself. I think that's wonderful. So as you think about your chapter, what do you want a reader or our listeners, what do you want their takeaway to be? How do you see this applying to their lives?
There is incredible freedom when we untether ourselves from the expectations that we have created for ourselves or that others have created for us unintentionally around what we have to offer and what we can give. And my hope is that as readers get to imagine themselves in Susanna's story, that we hold a little more loosely the lies that we've told ourselves for so long about what those numbers mean, and then see that God has given us all that we have, and how do we get to be generous, not just because we know we should, because I've heard, that I'm supposed to be generous and I'm supposed to give this amount of money, but because we're like surrendered and obedient and courageous in those moments. That's my hope. And the reminder that it's a daily.
I love that. You've given us so many great takeaways to incorporate and to learn from. But I just one of your own stories. We haven't talked enough about what you do, and I think how you connect with Susanna so much in your mission work. But one of a beautiful quote from your chapter is where you say, "What started as a posture of let me help into a posture of let me learn." So, can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, by nature or nurture, grew into having a heart of helping, and that the more I help, also the more I would hear people say, "Oh, you're so helpful," and I would love those words of affirmation because I received that kind of love and I hold on to it. And then I started to realize that if I didn't make it about me, I could learn so much in those moments of helping. And instead of thinking about it in terms of what I could give, it's what I could learn from the people that I was surrounded by. Like in Costa Rica, there was a community that I would spend a lot of time with, and they made their homes out of whatever scraps of metal they could find in the riverbed. And then there was a season in my life growing up where my dad was homeless, and I actually had to drop him off at the homeless shelter and drive to my own house. And that is a moment where you want to help and you want to give everything, but actually the most helpful thing you can do is drive away and learn from that moment, like that this isn't mine to carry, actually. And the most generous thing I can do is let them experience the love of God, and they can't do it for me, maybe in that moment. And so I guess the reality is if I can like let go of my ego a little bit more every day and look for a lesson in it, I think that will allow more room for generosity.
I love it. That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that story because that's had to have been a really hard thing to do. And so what would be a practical challenge that we could challenge our listeners with Susanna's chapter?
I think the first one is the necessity to ask ourselves, like, where do I need healing? And that is a hard question to ask. It is not easy, but there's probably something in our heart or mind today that we could ask the Lord for healing for. And then once we've received that, like, what do we get to give through it? I'm good. That's challenging to me. I'm going to do that too. And maybe it doesn't have to be daily. Maybe it's like once a week. And then to follow up with that actually would be like to have a conversation with somebody, because we can keep it to ourselves. But if we have a conversation about it, we can actually like take action and move in that space of healing towards generosity. And then the other thing, I love this. This isn't my own idea, but I think I heard John Mark Comer talk about it in this amazing series they did. And he was like, every time he swiped his credit card, he would tap and like, thank you, Lord, for this. Like just that thought, this isn't mine. Like, thank you, Lord, for this. And then whatever it is that God has given us an opportunity, whether it's, for something that we need, he's providing for us, or an opportunity to give to somebody else. That thought of, this isn't mine. Whatever it is, it's not mine anyways. So those two things.
What a huge transition in our thought process is, I think we hold on to it because we think it's ours, and we have that scarcity of thinking it'll never come back if I let it go. So what a huge change of mindset. I love that. Thank you so much.
I love those challenges. It's definitely something I need to I need to apply in my own life this week and moving forward. I do love, and I've tried, especially with my house, but I love that you challenge us to even think about, the smaller things, the everyday things. And someone said, I don't know, like, what if you only had what you thanked God? Like, if you woke up tomorrow and the only thing you have is what you thanked God for, an eye-opening thing. But, so we think about the big things, like for me, the home or the job or the family, but or health. But to really think about the small things, that's a great challenge. So thank you for that.
What I love about Susanna, again, is her whole biography was her name, and that she gave out of her own means, not a book deal. Like, she didn't have a Matthew, Mark, Luke, John book. She didn't have a sermon that she preached that we know of, but her faithfulness is still echoing in our journeys 2,000 years later. And so the reminder to us today that she gave radically because she was healed. So she gave to the one who made her whole is such a beautiful picture of what we get to do also. But we get to give to the one who makes us whole. Again, a quiet, maybe sometimes it's quiet, it's unseen, it feels unseen. If you look at the whole Bible, you might not see Susanna, but you can learn so much from her generosity and her heart. So I hope that we can remember that.
That's so good. So thank you so much for coming on today, Sabeth. And we just celebrate with you. I remember when I reached out to you about the project and we talked through possibly Susanna because of your entrepreneurial spirit and the journey you're going through on learning about stewardship and money. I remember going, oh, this is a big ask. She only has a couple of words to go off of to build a whole chapter, but you did it, and you did it so beautifully and so wonderfully. So I thank you so much for being a part of the project and for coming on and broadening out and letting us get to know the Sabeth behind the Susanna. So thank you.
Thank you. It's such a gift to be with you both.
Sabeth, we just want to thank you for sharing your heart and your vulnerability with the stories and how it aligns so much with Susanna. Some beautiful lessons to carry and apply to our lives, obedience and being able to give back to the one who heals us. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining us today. Also Called provides a space for honest conversations about the truth of who God is, who we are, and the relationships He wants us to have with Him, each other, the church, and ourselves. This episode was just the start of the conversation. Be sure to check the show notes for extra resources to go further. You can also find our social media sites to join the discussion. Don't miss our next chat by subscribing to our YouTube channel or wherever you listen to podcasts.
Also Called is part of Bible and Pop Culture, a crowd-funded nonprofit that allows us to provide our content to start great conversations for free. You can help us keep doing this by checking out BibleandPopCulture.com or AlsoCalled.org's donate subscribe buttons with a one-time gift, supporting us monthly, or sharing us with someone who might like the conversation. Thank you for being a part, and see you next conversation.